Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Today we are learning the fourth Perek of Shabbos. Happens to be a very, very short Perek, only two Mishnayos today. But that's okay, because we do a Perek a day. Echad Amar Echad Amami, Rakshi Chavin, Eslibo Levim Shema Shamayim, right? But one day we have a very long Perek, one day we have a very short Perek, but a Perek is a Perek, and that's what we do. Baruch Hashem. Today's shiur is sponsored Lila Nishmas, our Nachman ben Simcha Cohen, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shepsel, Bracha Sarba Shmuel Leib, and Binam Moshe ben Yosef, may the Hashem will have an aliyah. Today is also sponsored Lila Fur Shalema, Ada Sarah Bas Leah, and Chana Pesel Bas Yent of Soshar Chal Yisrael, and as a schus for Avigdor Aram ben Gittel Masha, Sefer Bracha Vaslecha for him and his entire mishpacha, and lastly but not least, uh, the second week of Kislev, which is sponsored by the Blackbird Recruiting Group. For thank you for your sponsorship and haslach in all your endeavors. Okay, here we go. Two Mishnayos to go. Perek Daled Mishnah Aleph. Bamet Tomnin. This perek is about insulating food on Shabbos. So as an intro, the Chachamim answered keeping food hot for Shabbos by completely surrounding a pot with something with a substance that adds heat. This is usher even if it's done on Erev Shabbos, because if it was surrounded by heat, then people would back in the day would likely bury their pots in hot ash containing glowing embers, and as we said before, the embers and the coals are problem on Shabbos. So you might come to stir the embers or fix the coals, and that is a malacha and that's being over at malacha of mavir, of lighting a fire. So even if you are not playing with coals and embers like you have nowadays, no one has coals or embers in their house on Shabbos, typically not, most cases, then it's still usher. But it is permissible to insulate a pot before Shabbos if the substance or item used is only there to preserve the food's heat, but does not make it hotter. So we're going to discuss that in the next two Mishnayos of what's going on over here. So Perek Daled Mishnah Aleph, Bamet Tomnin, with what materials can we surround the pot on Erev Shabbos to insulate it and keep it warm on Shabbos? But Bamet Aim Tomnin, and with what materials can you not surround the pot? Which materials are going to add heat, and that would be a problem. Ain tone a little bit gavas, a little bit zevel. You cannot surround pots with olive or sesame pulp, as we discussed in previous classes, nor with manure. All these things, when they're packed together, they become extremely hot and they generate heat. Lo b'malech, lo b'sir, lo b'chol. Nor can you surround pots with either salt, lime, or sand, because they also add heat. Bein lachim, bein neveshim. These substances may not be used whether they're moist or dry, because they add heat even if they're dry. Even though these substances generate more heat when they're moist, they still generate heat when they're dry, and it is usher to do. But the low b'teva, low b'zagin. You cannot use straw nor grape skins to insulate your food. Low b'mulchim, low b'asavim, nor with pieces of soft, unprocessed material such as wool strips or like remnants of worn clothing. No, and you cannot use grass either. Bisman shehein lachem. When these substances are still moist, you can't use these when they're still moist. I will tone them by hand, but you can surround, but you can use these substances, both the straw and the grape skins and the unprocessed materials, so the wool strips and everything. You can use them when they are dry because these substances because they only add heat when they are moist and they don't really have much an effect when they are dry. Okay, cool. Now third category. So you had two categories. You had your one category which is usher whether it was moist or dry. Then you had another category where they were usher when they're moist, mutter when they're dry. And a third category, tomnim bechesus Paris, you can surround a pot of food to insulate it with clothing or with produce, meaning like grains or beans that are small enough to be used to insulate food. I'm not exactly sure how you would do that, but the Mishnah says you can. The kan feyona ubenesores so charashtim ubeneores so pishtan daka, as well as with pigeon feathers, or with sawdust, or with fine flax combings, meaning I mean, a fine flax combing is a splinter that falls from the flax as it is combined, as it's combed out, because these substances do not add heat. They maintain the heat, but they don't add heat. Rabbi Yehuda Aser B'daka, Rabbi Yehuda forbids surrounding a pot with fine flax combings because they do produce some heat. Umatir Begasa, and permits only coarse combings. Because again, you can maintain the heat and preserve the heat, but you cannot add heat. It was brought down that some of the pot covers that we have nowadays, which say on it Shabbos Kodesh, which covered the urns and stuff like that. Well, some of them are actually usher, and they should really be saying on them the Chilul Shabbos Kodesh because they actually are usher to use. But again, consult your local Orthodox rabbi for Sakalacha on practical applications. This is not a halacha shiur, and I am not a licensed posek, so do not rely on me for any piskei halacha whatsoever. Nor should you rely on ChatGPT or any of the other AI devices. Mishnah Beis, the last one for today. We only had two. Okay, Tomnin Shalchin. We can surround the pot of food with animal hides because they do not add heat. You want to take a piece of like like a whatever, a metaltalin or sun, and we may move hides on Shabbos. Even the hides that were not used to insulate food, they're not muksa since they can be used as rugs for sitting. So it's interesting. So you have something designated for mutter use, and then you want to use it for a different use. According to the Mishnah, that seems to be okay. People used to sit on the rugs on the floor, and yeah, so you can use it in other ways once it's designated for mutter use. The gizet semer, we may surround the pot of food with wool shearings that are no longer naturally moist. No sun, but it's also to move them, even if they were used for insulating food, because their primary use is to be spun into thread and then woven into clothing, which is obviously also to do on Shabbos. What then should he do if he surrounded his pot with wool shearing before Shabbos? How can he open the pot without having to move the wool that's piled on top of it? That's kind of funny. So no kisoy. So he should remove the lid of the pot that is covered with the wool shearings. The haynofus, and the wool shearings will then fall off on their own since he's not moving them directly. This is mutter to do on Shabbos. And Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah says, Kupa, if one wants to remove a pot of food from the box in which it is surrounded with wool shearings, Mata al Sida Vinotel, he should tilt the box that that's holding the shearings and the pot onto its side, and then take out the pot. That way, all the shearings will slide to one side, and when he wishes to replace the pot, he can place it in the area of the box that's empty of the shearings. Then, once the box is stood upright, then the shearings will fall into place around the pot. But you cannot remove the pot from the box without tilting the actual box. Okay, don't tell us at home. Because perhaps we're concerned that he might take the pot out of the box and then be unable to return it because then the shearings will fall into the hole and remain with the pot. The shearings will fall into the hole that they remain with the pot when the pot was removed. Okay, so once that happens, he might forget and move the shearings out of the way in order to pull back the pot, violating the issur of muksa. Therefore, it's usher to remove the pot from the box in the first place, unless he toasts the box first, as explained. Chachamim say, no tel umachzir. You may take the pot out without tilting the box and then replace it in the box as long as the wool shearings have not fallen into the place where the pot was. And the Chachamim were not concerned that if this is permitted, he might be tempted to move the shearings if they did, in fact, fall into the hole. And finally, if one did not cover the pot while it was still day on Erev Shabbos, he may not cover it once night has fallen on Shabbos, once Shabbos started, because even with a substance that does not add heat, this is because we're concerned that if we allowed him to wrap hot food on Shabbos to preserve his heat, then he might notice that the pot that he's about to wrap has cooled off, and then he's going to come to reheat it, and that is a problem. Kiso in this gala, if he covered the pot before Shabbos with something that does not add heat but only preserves it, and the pot then became uncovered on Shabbos, so then he's allowed to cover it again because it was already covered before Shabbos and he wasn't negligent in that matter. Memale es hakiton, one may fill a water bottle with cold water. The notion the tachas hakar and place it under a pillow or a cushion on Shabbos in order to take away its chill. Even though it's prohibited to wrap hot food in any substance on Shabbos, wrapping cold food is permissible, as that is not the normal manner of insulating food, and therefore it is mutter. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow as we continue with Perek Hey of Masechah Shabbos. Have a wonderful day. Be well.